All right, we are broadcasting live. This is Armin Navabi from Atheist Republic, and we are with.
Abdul Yafai from Yemen.
All right, but you're not in Yemen right now.
No, I'm in the U.S.
All right, great. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us today. This is a very important topic that many people are not talking about, and it's weird given the amount of people that are being affected by it. We want to talk about what's happening in Yemen right now and the war in Yemen, and you have experience on this and some knowledge on this. So before we get started, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and let us know who you are?
Sure. So I'm born to Yemeni immigrants from the U.S. They are all U.S. citizens now, but they have grown their whole lives in Yemen, both of them. We go every year back to Yemen during the summer breaks, 3 to 4 months, and I've spent years there, also going to school over there, learning Arabic and mixing with the community, basically.
Great. And so you how long? So you actually been there? Even though you weren't born there.
Yeah, no, I've lived there for more than 4 to 5 years cumulatively,
Okay.
and learned a lot of things from there. Met a lot of people.
So tell us, give us a summary about what's happening in Yemen right now and what's the situation and what should
Yeah,
we do?
definitely.
Yeah.
As of lately, there's been multiple outbreaks of cholera. I think some of the highest we've seen recorded. Bombing of schools, infrastructure, main ports in Yemen being bombed where humanitarian aid and food get through. So a lot of people are dying of starvation, millions being displaced of their homes. Um, it's it's a huge crushing blow to one of the already poorest countries, if not the poorest country in the Middle East. A lot of people are dying. A lot of people are starving. Much worse than many of the things that are happening around the world.
And so this is right now one of the major humanitarian crisis, top up there in the world, right? Like children are dying from starvation. There's disease, there's war. There was already poverty, but now because of this war, there's even more poverty. Aid can't get in, and so many people are suffering. But it doesn't. If you watch the news, it doesn't seem that people are treating it the way that this needs to be treated, right?
Yeah, definitely. On the scale of this tragedy and this crisis, you'd expect a lot more coverage, but the all honest truth is that nobody benefits or nobody stands to benefit from helping Yemen or giving it, some noise. America doesn't stand to benefit. In fact, they stand to face shame, or Saudi as well. There's no real big major country that actually stands anything to benefit from talking about this.
So how did we get here? How did this happen? Can you go through a little bit of a background for?
Sure. I mean, if we start from the beginning, it would have boiled down to something religious like Zaydis versus Shafi'is and Salafis. These are three ideologically opposed groups. But to be honest, now it's more like a Game of Thrones power grab style of warfare. And the main thing that's happened through the years is that people have wanted to take power, and the people who had power until recently was the faction with Ali Abdullah Saleh. Now he's with the Houthis, I think, right now. But to
So
be
who are
honest,
the before you go there? Who are the Houthis and who are the other side?
right? So I guess I should explain the
Yeah.
the players. And so one of the players is the Houthis, as we know them, and while a lot of people say that Iran backs them,
Mm.
uh, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Iran has somewhat of a limited role to play in this, in the fact that they use Iran Shia teachings and methodologies, but they do reject the claim that Iran has to it. So they don't believe that the Irani family is the children of Ali bin Abi Talib. They believe that they themselves, the Yemenis, or the Houthis, are the children of Ali bin Abi Talib, and they have the stake to the claim. You see?
So are you saying the Iranians are backing them or are not backing them?
they're backing them because they have a Shi'i background and Shi'i teaching,
Right.
but they don't fully support them because Iran wants its own families to stay in power. So it's they have differences.
So go back a little bit. Like, let's say, so Iran got involved, and is that is they did do support them a little bit. Is this Iran's fault that they started supporting the
No,
Houthis against the government? So what?
no. The Houthis, they were for the most part they were regarded as a nuisance when they started off, and nobody really cared about them. Nobody really decided to fight them. The big fights were between Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was the president at the time, and he was supported by Saudi and U.S. It was him versus Al-Ahmar, who was somewhat also supported by the Saudi because he was a second-hand man, but he was also supported by the Muslim Brotherhood. Those are the big fights, and they ignored the Houthis for the most part. And while that fight continued to happen, the Houthis began to grow, and they also gained some support from the Sunnis because they embodied a rejection of the political elite.
Right. So okay. So can you go through the timeline and from the beginning and the major players, and when did Saudi Arabia get involved, and why did Saudi Arabia get involved, and why does Saudi Arabia care about Yemen, and why does Iran care about Yemen?
Definitely. So Saudi, they have been involved from the beginning of Yemen, and since there was a part of time where they actually took 1/3 of Yemen's land. So 1/3 of Yemen, that as you see it right now, was taken by Saudi in the same way like the U.S. took from Mexico. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so they have a large vested interest in both keeping the Yemeni population down, but also keeping a stronghold there. But we are also the Yemenis are also one of the how would I say this? Saudi's reliance on Yemen, not only as a tourism, like because a lot of Yemenis go to Hajj, a lot of Yemenis go to Saudi and believe in Saudi customs. But also because there's a large amount of Yemeni immigrants who go to Saudi as like indentured servants and work that way and under such harsh conditions and such backwards laws that it makes a lot of money for Saudi.
All right.
You see?
And do you think that Saudi Arabia is worried that Iran is like creeping in, like just like they're doing in Syria and Lebanon and Iraq? And
I think Iran is worried of Saudi.
okay.
Yeah, and so because Saudi has had a hold in Yemen for as long as at least I can remember. Iran, once they had a Shi'i backing over there who actually had some military presence, which we know as the Houthis, they started to come in and try to challenge Saudi. But not directly. It's completely proxy war.
Okay, so this is one of the many proxy wars. Do you think that Iran and Saudi Arabia that are fighting? Would you say that this is one of the?
Yes.
Okay. So
I just say that Iran is not ideologically on the same ground with the Houthis and their counterparts in Yemen.
But Iran has but it's closer to them compared to the other. Like Iran sometimes also supports sometimes Sunni groups that they like. Sometimes they support Hamas, right?
Right.
But more often than not, they do use the small similarities that even though they don't completely agree with Houthis, just because they're Shia, they still use that as an excuse to make them a proxy for Iran, right? Like
yeah, the enemy of my enemy, basically, is what you're trying to say.
Right.
Yeah, they do this.
Okay, so do you think like this war would happen if it wasn't because Saudi Arabia and Iran? If it wasn't because of Saudi and Iran involving, like, do you think Yemeni people are suffering because Iran and Saudi Arabia are using it as a pawn against each other?
So when I lived in Yemen, the Houthis were not a big deal. They weren't even. Nobody even knew their names, but we were still suffering, and a majority of it was because of Saudi relations in Yemen.
Right.
Yemen was still suffering, not to the extent that it is now. Definitely, the extent that it is now is a problem between Iran and Saudi having involvements. But we were still on the downside. We were still the poorest country, and we still had a lot of problems. And a lot of these problems stemmed from Saudi's involvement. So Saudi has a major role to play in how bad it's been for Yemenis.
And this allegations that Iran is supporting the Houthis with weapons, is that true, do you think?
I really don't know to be completely honest. I do think that they're supporting them in some way or another because of the they have a common enemy. I don't know if it's as much as the Saudi helps the other sides.
Right. I mean, there was at least proof that they were in communication with regards to strategies. At least that was yeah. And so, with regards to the U.S., this recent weapons sales that the United States had with Saudi Arabia, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars was it? Was it 200 or something like that, right? But
yeah,
was that like are those weapons that the United States is providing to Saudi Arabia to bomb people in Yemen? Like, would that make United States responsible for the war crimes? Is that fair to call it war crimes, right? The war crimes in Saudi
definitely
Arabia.
War.
All right.
There's definitely war crimes.
So United States is not helping, but they're also actually providing the weapons to Saudi Arabia for the war crimes that they're committing.
Yes, actually, when I was living there as well, I would constantly live under the drones, U.S. drones. We were constantly hearing about people getting killed by drones, and like near us, not even a couple of miles away. I'd always hear it, and so people wouldn't usually talk about Saudi. They'd most likely attribute it to the U.S., which more and more fosters U.S. Animosity in that region. The people do blame the U.S. for the involvement they have and the amount of supplies they support to the or the amount of support they supply to the Saudi government. Especially when the bombs drop and you see the shells are U.S. made, and the airplanes and all these things.
Right. Yeah. And who's stopping right now? There's a lot of aid in the ships, and that they're not getting to the people, right?
Yes.
So who's stopping that? Is that Saudi Arabia?
That's Saudi Arabia.
Why? Like, is it like, do these people like? I think like they have stopped even trying to not look bad, right? Like, people are dying, and they don't have medicine, and they don't have food, and they're like stopping the aid. Like, these are not even weapons. Yeah. Like, yeah, so have they stopped giving a shit about how they like? I knew they stopped caring about how they treat their own people for a long time ago. But this, like how do they justify this to themselves? Like, don't they wake up and like look in the mirror and like, I'm a shitty human being. Like, people are dying, and there's aid right there, and we're stopping it. Like, can you? What is they're just? Have you even heard of their justification for these things?
So I went to Saudi on a Umrah, Hajj, like a kind of thing, and I talked to a lot of Yemenis who work in Riyadh and Jeddah and all these places. And this is in Saudi's own backyard, to give you an idea. That place is full of its own amount of human rights violations that are just insane. And like how they treat the Yemenis, and how they force them to do one job, and how they basically force them to pay their sponsors, which are basically like, it is a form of indentured servitude if ever I've seen one. This is in their own backyard. So if you're talking about somewhere where I can't see it, why would I care? Saudi does not really care at all. They've been bombing hospitals, schools, and things like this, and civilian territory, like known civilian spots, schools, right, and hospitals in Houthi territory. And included in one of them is the main port, which not only humanitarian aid passes through, but most of the food. causing famine and a lot of deaths and the cholera uprising that we see right now. So no, they don't give a shit.
Okay, this is insane. Like, so one girl died in United States by white supremacists, and it got a lot of attention, and that it's good that it got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And Assad bombs his own people, and it gets some coverage, but not as much as one person in the United States. And then you have, so at least there was some reaction to that. Egypt, you have a lot of people being imprisoned. It didn't get a lot of attention until recently, where some aid to Egypt is being stopped. But compared to all of that, this seems a huge priority. Like, why is this not headline news? Like, this is something that I think is like one of those Rwanda situations where years from now we're going to look back and we're going to be ashamed for not talking about it, right? This is going to go in history of one of those times in that the whole world ignored crimes, that the international community just ignored. Like, why is this not a major agenda of, in the UN? Like, why are we hearing about Egypt imprisoning people, but we're not hearing about people dying, about hospitals being bombed, right? Hospitals.
Yeah.
Why is this not being covered?
Like I said earlier, like nobody stands to really benefit from it, and
But
you make a really good point.
but I know, but okay, so. But there should be some people that give a shit, even if they don't. Like, are we really that fucked is the human race really? Like, so for Syria, is it because over there that because they care about that because it's breeding terrorists that's going to come to the West? Is it and is that really that's the reason why we're talking about that and Iraq? And because we think Yemen is going to produce Al-Qaeda members, right? But maybe only then people are going to talk about it, right? Because people are going to start talking about it because it's going to be a threat to the West. But before it's a threat to the West, nobody seems to give a shit. Like, is the international community really that selfish to only start caring about crimes when it becomes a threat in our own backyard?
Yeah, so the U.S. has tried to get Saudi to not bomb civilians. I think during the Obama administration at least, they tried to make the Saudis agree to not bombing well-known civilian outposts. But Saudi just kind of ignores them for the most part. They don't really give a shit. And the U.S. doesn't want to compromise the relationship with Saudi. But to be all honest, if we always look at the way that history rolls out, I see it this way: $1 is equal to 250 riyal. So for me, mental arithmetic, it would take about 250 Yemenis to die to make the noise of one American actually in the news.
How do you come up? How do you?
No, I'm saying it like the worth of the person to the U.S. or to the media is how much money it's their country and their places are worth. It's not, they don't really give a shit about human lives anymore.
Well, what do you think we could do for more people to give a shit?
As far as solutions go, there's many solutions, but as far as people giving a shit, aside from appealing to humanity, and I don't know, like the UN should be the forefront of all of this. Right. If they haven't learned their lesson from Rwanda and all these other places,
shouldn't be shaming the UN for not doing anything. Shouldn't be shaming the United States is selling the weapons. They're like, Trump came and like, oh, these terrorists at these Muslim countries, and now as soon as he came to power, he's basically give them the sweetest weapons deal of all time for them to go direct, not while they were in the war with Yemen, and knowing exactly what they're going to be used for. Like, shouldn't like all these Trump supporters that used to be so anti-Islam and anti-Muslim countries, like they should be shaming Trump for this. Like, you know, we talk about Trump and we get so pissed when he says, you know, grab women by the pussy, and we're like, oh, that's horrible, and everybody's shocked. And when he doesn't directly condemn white supremacists, everybody loses their mind. But when he sells weapons to, and he goes to Saudi Arabia and praises them, and he doesn't say anything about a country that is bombing children and stopping aid to sick people and bombing hospitals, no, people like, that's what you should be angry with Trump for, you know?
There's
That's
so much.
the thing that you should be telling Trump, what the fuck? Not, you know, I don't know, man. I don't understand.
I know what you're saying. This is like literally the most direct geopolitical cause to terrorism, aside from the religion itself. This is the most direct political cause of the terrorist growth that you see. Seriously, when you provide Saudi with these kind of means, okay, and when they see the U.S. supporting the people who are bombing them and the people who are causing the famine and all this problems, you get people who A, have nothing to lose, and B, they all they see is tragedy caused by weapons created by the U.S. And what you also get is the Saudi bolstering their Wahhabi Salafist kind of mindset by literally providing the paychecks for the shuyukh and the ideology to spread in Yemen. All the shuyukh that I've known and I've seen who are in the highest parts of Yemen and who are promoting this kind of jihadist mindset and the Islamist mindset are all being paid thoroughly by Saudi, and you're getting that problem there.
So do you think this is a religious war or a geopolitical one or a mix of both? What do you know, what's the nature, like, what's the nature of this? Because a lot of people say that when we point to wars and stuff, and they like, this has nothing to do with religion, or people say that this is, like, a lot of the conflicts in the Middle East, you know, sometimes, like, when it comes to, like, Saudi Arabia versus Qatar, that doesn't seem religious at all. But then when it comes to Iran and Saudi Arabia, seems to the underlying purpose to be non-religious, but then they take advantage of religious rhetoric to be able to get support for their cause. Is that an accurate, like, is that what you think is happening?
So yeah, definitely both sides have monetary incentive, of course, and they have geopolitical incentive, but they do use the religion a lot to be able to, you know, bolster their influence in the regions and, you know, create this kind of mindsets and this kind of war. We see that by the huge uprising of Al-Qaeda members in Yemen, which I've seen personally. You know, I can attest to.
Can you say a little bit about your different experiences that you had and the different talks you had with people there?
Yeah, sure. Let's start off with so when I went back to Yemen once, we have a lot of land in Yemen and in the southern region of Yafa, and my dad used that to make a girls a higher ed for girls. You know, my dad's a really upstanding person. He's a really good guy, but he used it to make a higher education for girls there in Yemen. And next thing you know, we're being claimed of modernizing their women or westernizing them. So one day during my dad's stay in Yemen, they literally sent a suicide bomber and 3 gunmen. Yeah, that's actually happened.
Wow.
Yeah, we still have the pictures and everything. He tried to climb up during the night and explode himself, which he did. He exploded, but he didn't get anybody. We have a very mountainous terrain. Yeah, a lot of problems are in Yemen. I've met a bunch of these kind of guys, a bunch of these jihadist kind of mindset guys who don't really care and have a kind of a cause, and they think that they can do whatever they want basically because there's really no government there. Yeah, most of the kids that they get to do these suicide bombings and these crazy things, like the one that was sent to me and my family, was a like a 20-year-old drugged up kid who came from a very poor family. That was it. They promised him Jannah. They promised him money for his family, and just go on ahead.
So do so is there anybody from within Yemen that you think we could also get in touch with also? And also, do you think here's another problem? If this was a war crime by non-Muslims on Muslims, the Muslims would be all talking about it a lot, because
Definitely.
because it's Muslim on Muslim, people don't go out and say like, oh, we're being prosecuted, right? So because it doesn't sell, it's not the narrative. If it was like, in Burma, if you had like, Buddhists and Muslim, the Muslims would be like, look, they're mistreating us. But this is so sad that Muslims are not talking about it as much as they should, because the other side is also Muslim. And non-Muslims also, ex-Muslims, they need to talk about it more, because if this was Muslims on ex-Muslims, ex-Muslims would be talking about it a lot more than they are. If this was Muslims on Christians, Christians would be talking about this more, right? So, but unfortunately, it's a situation that it doesn't fit into any narrative that people like to sell. Like, oh, look, we're being prosecuted. No. So nobody's suffering financially. Nobody that matters financially is suffering financially from this. In fact, people are making money from this. There's lots of deals to be made. Nobody that is usually cries, oh, prosecution, can use this as a narrative, because it doesn't fit into any of those narratives, right?
Yes.
But yet we have children dying from starvation, and the latest report came that if it drops by if the food supply drops by even a little bit more, there's going to be thousands of more children that are going to just starve, right?
I think you really hit the nail on the head with that one. Literally, when you're saying that, it buys into nobody's narrative. Nobody stands to gain from exposing what's happening there. Nobody, no racial bias that anybody can point at. No political bias. Nobody stands to gain any money from it. And if you really want to get more exposure, somebody has to find an angle in which somebody benefits. That's going to be hard,
Yeah, so this actually really hurts, because this kind of shows that even those other crises that people talk about, it's because there's something else that they care about. Because in this crisis that nobody seems to benefit by talking about it, there's not that much attention to it. It shows that the people that are bringing attention to everything else only do it because there's something else that makes them care about this.
Yeah, the question is being begged, is there any true humanitarians left, or is everybody just trying to, have a dog in the fight?
And by the way, if anybody watches this and they actually are talking about this on their channel, or on their, if there's human rights advocates there that have been talking about this and they haven't getting any attention, please comment in the YouTube description of this, and I will go check the comment, and I'll bring Atheist Republic's Facebook has a lot of followers, and tell us that you're bringing attention to this, and we'll share your channel, we'll share your videos, we'll share your reports, we'll share your fundraising, as long as it's legitimate fundraising. We'll share your fundraising efforts. Please, let us know who is doing the most to help this situation, and who do we need to reach out to shame for being silent about this, right?
Definitely.
And I think the best strategy is, there are some people that have too much of a following, so we reaching out to them is not going to go even in their radar. There's some people that have so little following that even if we grab their attention, them speaking about this. So I'm thinking, like, let's find those people in the sweet spot in the middle that will notice us, that if we target them and ask them to please talk about this, let's identify them and go to them and be like, please talk about this. This is not about, oh, are atheists being prosecuted or ex-Muslims being prosecuted or Muslims
About
being
human
prosecuted.
rights.
This is about humans suffering, and nobody seems to give a shit.
Yeah, not even human rights, human lives.
Yeah, this is not about people going to jail. This is about people dying. All right, this is about aid being just a few kilometers away, and people dying from stuff that could be that those aid will stop, and nobody, and it's just so he's just pressuring, and people say like, oh, I'm not going to be able to make a difference. Yes, you are. If you go out there and find these people and ask them, just like tag me on Twitter, when you're telling somebody to bring attention to something, tag Armin Navabi, and I will retweet you bringing attention to that person on Atheist Republic, so that person maybe notices that you are reaching out to them. Right? Do something. And also people
have
think,
to talk.
yeah, I mean, yeah, shame people for being silent about this. And Saudi Arabia does do, it's hard for people to believe, like, but we have noticed that sometimes when there's too much attention on something, Saudi Arabia does feel pressure to change a little bit, not as much as normal countries. But it's still, if you get it really high up there, they might actually, because we have to identify the people that are involved with. We have to, in Saudi Arabia, actually, the new king, the new prince, he is, what's his name? I forgot. He has a 30-year plan to shift the economy in Saudi Arabia to non-oil.
I remember.
Revenue. Yeah. So part of that is maybe like tourism. We have to make that plan fucking fail, right? We have to shame companies that deal with Saudi Arabia because of this. We have to go to, Saudi Arabia has a Twitter account and Facebook page for bringing tourism. People need to go troll that page, and basically any fucking post that Saudi Arabia makes about advertising Saudi Arabia, we have to blast it with the human rights violations that the country is having.
The war crimes, yeah.
The war crimes. They have to be like, no, you can't, with this fucking image, you can't have. Iran also, right? Iran actually cares more about this image because it enjoys more tourism than, actually, tourism to Iran has increased compared to some other countries in the Middle East. So, go on their tourist stuff and try to show that they're gonna tell people not to support a country that is bringing so many, bringing so much war. They're just, Iran has this thing now that is learning from North Korea. Iran's spreading its tentacles everywhere, and it doesn't matter who's hurting by doing that, because it understands that by spreading your tentacles all over the Middle East, it's going to be impossible for you not to negotiate with Iran, because Iran could fuck up everything if they wanted to, right? So they're pretty smart about that, but they have to suffer in a different way. They have to be like, if you are responsible for a proxy war in Yemen, people shouldn't spend their money by going to Iran. Don't support this. Go to all their tourists. I don't know what other solutions. These are the things that I'm just coming up. Let me see if there's any suggestions in the live chat.
PR pressure is where it starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody has an axe to grind. Saudi and Iran, they deserve most of the beef that's hurting the people right now. There's ideological wars within the place, but as far as killing and war crimes go, yeah, we should be shaming not only the Saudi, but also the U.S. for helping the Saudi.
The problem with Iran, though, is that Iran is like, just has this government that everybody sees, but then they also have this pastaran. I don't, what's in English? I don't know. But basically, they own half the economy, right? And they, people always deal with the president and the ministers there. I think they represent the country, but most of this shit is done by this other half of the government that doesn't really
behind the door.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What is it? Is
Under
it?
the table puppeteers, kind of.
Yeah, the Revolutionary Guard. Yeah, so yeah, I mean they basically own half the economy, they own all the guns, and if all of a sudden the government changes into something that they don't like, they could just basically change everything the
Switch.
way they want it, right? So it's kind of like a government that everybody sees and a government that people don't see, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk to Iran's about, talk to this Zarif guy. I think that he controls the things that Iran does in the Middle East, but he doesn't have, this sports army. It's not under him, right? It's not under the
Yeah.
presidency. It's not even under the Khamenei. There's, the most powerful force in Iran is this Pastaran, which
I
is
didn't know that.
yeah, which is even I mean, they claim complete loyalty to Khamenei, but if one day we have a rapper that says like, oh well, let's get rid of Pasaran, I think they're going to be able to just change him, right? Because they're fully loyal to the supreme leader as long as the supreme leader is loyal to them, I think. But I don't know. It's complicated. But
That's fun, huh?
Saudi Arabia is more simple. I mean, I don't know actually, but Saudi Arabia seems to be more central. Like all things ends with the monarchy, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't know. Somebody could correct us if that's not the case.
Yeah,
So
it seems to be the royal family in control of most, if not everything.
yeah, and if he has a 30-year plan to have other sources of revenue other than oil, maybe if we could bring attention to that and find people, because the only thing they seem to care about is money, right? So the only
Staying in
way
power. That's all it is.
yeah, well, the only way to change their policies is to hurt them what they care about, and that's money. I
That's
mean,
money.
we can't take their oils away. Maybe this is the reason why we should support alternative energy. If global warming is not enough, just invest in solar energy just because of this.
If the death of the world isn't enough, let's do it out of spite at least.
Yeah. So what do you think? What are your thoughts about the Al Qaeda presence in Yemen, and how are they? Al Qaeda is dying in Iraq and Syria, so they're just desperate to go find places where there is pretty much no government. I mean, or the government isn't that powerful to stop them. So Yemen seems like a good spot, and they're taking advantage of that, right? I mean, they have always been there, but have they been growing recently?
Yeah. So here's what I have to say about Al Qaeda, and this is the honest what I've seen honestly, is that the drones actually do kill some Al Qaeda members. They actually do. They're not just aiming at random. They actually do get groups of them. And a lot of the Al Qaeda members and shady organizations that I've seen while living there have been targeted and have been bombed, and people who I can name by names have been targeted and killed as well. Problem is that the institutions that bring these people to power, the institutions that they constitute the whole fundamentals behind the Al Qaeda, are supported by Saudi sheikhs and Saudi, money, and where one person dies, another one takes his place. That's seems to be what's happening in Yemen right now. So they're not facing a decline. Some people are going to die, and they've accepted that, but other people just take their place because there's enough money going into those as it is.
Right. By the way, the name of the crown prince is Mohammed bin Salman, which was just recently replaced by I think his uncle. I mean, with his uncle. So here's a devil's advocate, which may sound evil. Maybe Al Qaeda's presence will help the U.S. give a shit about, because if Yemen becomes a breeding ground for terrorists to come to the West, then people will be like, oh shit, we need to stop this war crimes in Yemen, right? This is so bad though. This is I don't know.
The problem is that people right now think that maybe Al Qaeda is coming from Yemen because Yemen's naturally a terroristic kind of place. Well, it's not really true. Like, they have to see what's causing these people to turn into terrorists and what's causing such a growth in there, you know? And
Right.
while some of it is religious, some of it's also geopolitical. There's a mix, and they're both caused by influences.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned about Saudi Arabia spreading this ideology. You know, I think they have been doing this for a very long time, right? And
Yeah.
Iran has been doing that for a long time as well. And this has been a major competition about Iran and Saudi Arabia spreading their own ideology. And I think Iran has done a much more effective job at doing this, right? You know, when Khomeini came and he did his revolution, he wasn't, you know, his idea was not that this is not an Iranian revolution, that this is an Islamic revolution, and soon he will capture Iraq and Karbala will come back to the Shia hold, and he will get the Shia part of Saudi Arabia. Like when he ended the Iraq war, that was like him drinking. He said that he's drinking the poison. You know, he thought like that's not where he wanted to end it. Like the fact that the Iranian Revolution turned into an Iranian revolution, he was not the very he wasn't nationalistic at all. He actually hated nationalism. He wanted this to be an Islamic, he wanted to be the leader of the Islamic world. This is the Islamic revolution that is going to capture. But even though it didn't end up being the way he wanted to, I mean, I think if he was alive today, he would be very happy to see how much Iran has control in Iraq now, right? Like they have posters of Khamenei in Baghdad. When I saw posters of Khamenei in Baghdad, I was like, oh my God, if Khamenei was alive, he would be like so
ecstatic.
Yeah. So they didn't manage to capture Karbala, but United States managed to gift it to Iran. But the thing is, though, even though it didn't become as successful as Khomeini was hoping, the people, this spread of Iran's Shiism, which is not really Shiism, it's Khomeinism.
Yeah.
Right? The people, you know, there's Hezbollah and Lebanon and everywhere. These people are loyal to Khamenei and this ideology, right?
Yeah.
They see Khamenei as their leader. But Saudi Arabia, like, just spread this disease, but everywhere. But their Wahhabism, which is their version, but they don't have much control over it after. It's like it actually sometimes comes and bites
them. It turns on them,
it turns on them, and they're like actually becomes a threat to them. And I think the reason is because they're allies with the West, right? And it's really hard for these true Wahhabists to take them as, you know, religious leaders where they're so materialistic and so pro-West and are even helping with Israel, right? So they're spreading this and they're hoping that it will help them, but they really don't have much control over what happens. None of these Al-Qaeda members or ISIS members are dying for the crown prince in Saudi Arabia. They fucking hate the crown prince in Saudi Arabia, right? Even though they funded the ideology, they will kill them if they get their hands on them. But the Hezbollah people, which Iran spreads, they die for Khamenei, right? They see them as God's representative on earth.
You're absolutely right in the fact that Wahhabism has a nasty. It doesn't really have any loyalty to any person on earth. It has more loyalty to ideology than a person, and so it very easily turns on Saudi. So there's this kind of false, you know, like, oh, we love the king, kind of North Korean-esque, you know, idea in Saudi within it.
Only in Saudi Arabia, but when they spread Wahhabism everywhere else, the Wahhabis outside Saudi Arabia, they don't say that. They fucking hate the crown prince.
They do. Everybody else hates him. Even people in Saudi who, you know, are Saudi, they say they like the crown prince, but I know many in Saudi who they don't care. They couldn't care less about him, and their loyalty comes to Islam, but there's nobody really, you know, who is true Islam.
They have temporary, like they have like Bin Laden for a while, and then they have Abu Bakr Baghdadi for a while, but it just comes and goes. These people are not the main people that actually funded the ideology, right? So yeah, I mean, Yeah. So, but I mean, the people, the people in Saudi Arabian government, they're scared of these people now because their main. I don't know. What do you think? Like, why are they still funding this, given that the main attacks? Sometimes I think they like it that they get attacked by ISIS because they want excuses to go and fight shit, and they're like, when you get attacked by, like, for example, in Egypt, when you have terrorist attacks, they just, yeah, by terrorists, they like, yes, now we could use this and go
And
fucking
excuse.
imprison secularists, which had nothing to do with the terrorists. They're like, oh no, we're in an emergency situation, we have to shut down everybody that speaks against us, right? And like in Turkey, when you had a coup, I think they fucking loved it. Like, oh, we have to silence everybody, even people that had nothing to do with the coup. So sometimes they want to be attacked by these people because it gives them the excuse that they need to be able to shut down everything they don't like.
Yeah, that's actually a very true reason. Another reason I see would be that they get a lot of tourism for Mecca, and even if you don't like Saudi, even if you don't like the royal family, Muslims still want to be going to Hajj and stuff like that, and they still
Right.
find a lot of money from that. So
Uh,
yeah, they have a lot of they have a stronghold. Whether we like it or not, like Mecca is, people are gonna flock to it, and
yeah, they have that. Like, they have that advantage. It's one of the five pillars of Islam. So no matter how
yeah,
much you tell people not to go there, you have 1.6, or 7 billion people in the world that have in their religion mandated to them that you have to go there if you can. So this is the best tourist, like, it, that's the best tourist, advertising that you have an entire religion that has one of its pillars
it
that tell you
honestly
that you
is.
have to go there.
Yeah,
So I
right.
think no other country has that. Imagine if you had, how
That
much,
level of PR.
yeah,
Yeah.
how good would it be for the tourism of, I don't know, like Thailand, that if there was a global world religion that had told you that you have to go to Thailand, that would be
Like
amazing.
if Buddhists were like, yeah, you have to visit Thailand,
Yeah.
or else
Jeez.
you might not go to heaven.
So
Everyone would be there.
yeah, what do you think? What do you think? How do you think this is gonna go? Like, what is this? Is this gonna get worse before it gets any better?
I mean, I don't know how more bottom of the barrel you can get for Yemen.
Yeah.
It's horrible as it is right now. Hopefully it doesn't, but I can see it getting worse before it gets better.
And what do you encourage people to do? Is there?
So aside from, as we said, hitting them where it hurts, like with the PR and with the tourism and exposing how bad these countries are that are committing these war crimes, um, and especially focusing on the fact that these war crimes are hitting ports for food and for humanitarian aid and schools, these central places for civilians, focusing on that, and also putting pressure on the U.S. for supporting these countries. Um, if there was an actual attempt for humanitarians, if there ever was a humanitarian group that wanted to actually help Yemen, infrastructure, food, if anything, and hospitals are key. A lot of people are like Doctors Without Borders were helping until Saudi bombed all these places and they had to like literally withdraw.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah,
How
it's really
how
messed up.
hard is it to get funding to make a new hospital, and Saudi Arabia just bombing hospitals? Like, this is so fucked up.
Yeah, yeah, I know. There has to be a voice for it first. That's the main part.
And I want to say, anybody that considers himself an activist in any way, please talk about this, because if you're not talking about this, you're you're basically ignoring the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time right now.
It's true.
So please at least feel responsible that I have to say something about this. I can't just ignore this. You can't say like, oh, this is not in my backyard, it's not affecting me. These are your fellow human beings. It doesn't matter if you agree with their ideology. These are children. These are children. It doesn't matter how far they are from you. Distance doesn't mean the suffering of people matters less. It doesn't matter if it's in the US or in Canada or in England or in Yemen, okay? say something, and it does, and it does. You know, you might think like, oh, my voice is not going to make a difference, but your voice, if it's part of a louder movement, if it's part of, you could be a small part of many people speaking out, right? And at least you could go to bed sleeping, not thinking that you didn't do the minimum that you could have done. If you could do more, you could go to Doctors Without Borders and donate to them. You could go and find humanitarian, you know, you could go and find people that are actually are bringing attention to this and retweeting them. But or go and find your politicians or your congressman or whoever, wherever you are, and mail them a letter and ask them to please talk about this. Those are things you could do more, but the least you could do is go and say, hey guys, watch this video in Yemen, look at these children dying, look at this BBC article. That's the least you could do, right? The smallest. And if you don't do that, I mean, you have to wonder, like, to yourself, why did, like, maybe it had an effect, maybe it didn't. But if I didn't do anything because it maybe didn't have an effect, you have to see how could you go to sleep thinking that people are suffering and you didn't do the minimum amount of that you could have done to bring attention to this, the minimum amount, which is just one tweet, one share, one
Say
post.
something.
Say
Definitely.
something. Say something. Anyways, thank you so much for talking to us.
No problem at all. My pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, before you go, if people have questions about what people, how can people find you, and you know, if they have questions, if they want to follow you, how can they get in touch?
Yeah. Okay. I revived my Twitter not just too long ago. I revived it to kind of like, you know, poke fun at some theists and Islamists and kind of, you know, get at them. But it's not really like a big Twitter account. You can contact me at Arab Muslim. The name I think is Samir Ferreira.
Okay. At Arab Muslim.
Yep.
All right. Send me a link to it after this so I could put it in the description of the videos.
Definitely. If anybody has any questions, yeah, I'd like to tell you about the situation. Definitely. And if you're willing to say something or do something, all power to you.
Sweet. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Have a good one.